Damian, tell me all about Van Halen's previous Lamborghini Miura that he owned before RIP passed away, and all the mods that you did to it before it was sold.
It's probably my favorite Miura that I've ever seen. It had that wide body that I guess we later found out that was from the factory.
Now, you mentioned that. It wasn't necessarily designated as an SV, but you think that it was, like, from my memory, 4 inches wider than the other Miuras?
Yes, for sure. Like, it was, the rear bonnet was wider, and it had wider wheels in the back. So it had that deep dish look.
Wow.
It had these custom wheels, knockoffs made that were just gorgeous. The whole car was just, after seeing that car for so long, other Miuras just didn't look as good to me.
Sure. It was a sexy car.
Right.
We did a video on it like 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's pretty epic looking. But
didn't you fuel inject it?
Yeah, so what we did, anybody who has a Miura knows that those cars like to set on fire. The carburetors are right on top of the heads, and the gas goes right into the cylinder holes, spark, boom. They just
detonate.
They go up in flames. And Eddie is famously had some stories of that car catching on fire.
Didn't it catch on fire, and he was on the way to the studio, and he called in advance saying, I'm on fire.
Yeah.
The car's on fire. Get the fire extinguishers.
Get an extinguisher ready. Let's go. That's how he told me the story. And then he just was running the lights, and he kept pushing the gas pedal so the gas would be going in the engine and not going out of the carburetors.
Oh.
So he's going balls out in a Miura back to his house trying to not let this car burn down.
So rock star. So rock star.
Dude, he's so badass.
Van Halen. Oh, he's so
a beast,
badass.
man.
He's so badass.
And he did it. As far as I know, he went back. They had a fire extinguisher. Boom, they got him. So then what we did, what a lot of people do is you just need to have a return fuel line, which really helps. The carburetor is not spit fuel out if you just leave the key on. So we, at that point, were like, hey, let's put a fuel injection system in the car. And I don't remember if it was my dad's idea or he was asking about it. I couldn't tell you for sure, but I remember doing it and fuel injecting the car. And then, we were using a fuel injection setup. This car had the same carburetors as Porsche's. So it had these 3-barrel carburetors, 4 3-barrel carburetors on it.
Ah,
so they made
4 3-barrel carburetors.
Yes, and so they made a fuel injection setup that we could buy that was would work on Porsches, right? So we would just get double everything, double the computer, double the whole throttle bodies, run the fuel injection. It was hard to tune the car. I can tell you that. It took a while to get it right because there's no idle control valve, so it was really kind of delicate getting the car to idle correctly.
With the fuel injection?
With the fuel injection. Okay. It did run amazing. It really added power. Like the car was...
I remember back in the day, it would start up immediately.
It was lightning. And it was a beast. I know the car wasn't that fast, but you were so low to the ground. I remember being on test drives, like scared out of my mind. My dad just ramming the hell out of the thing, going through the gears, and just the car, it screams. It sounds amazing.
Fast is all relative, but we're talking still over 300 horsepower probably, right?
For sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty lightweight car. There's not a whole lot going on there with that super delicate frame.
Now, the super delicate frame, it's interesting you say that because I thought some Miuras have a lot of holes in the frame and they would bend. Did that car have that?
All the Miuras. I guess they thought it was cool at the time, so they put holes in the frames to
make it lighter.
And it's just, all the frames. If you really start driving the car and abusing the car, they start bending, and they start mangling. You know what I mean? If someone puts a jack in the wrong place, the abuse, it gets forget if you get rust on it, it's over and out. So don't even. Snow. I mean, who's driving that car in snow? I don't know.
Maniacs.
Right. I mean, at this point in the world, I don't think it's ever going to happen again. But gorgeous car, delicate, very delicate bird.
One of the most known to be one of the most stunning cars of all time, the Miura.
It is gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. And it's a car that in pictures doesn't do it justice, because when you see it in person, you see how wide it looks and how low it is.
Makes sense.
It's so low. It's under your waistline. It's in
Right.
like you.
It does shock you. It does take your breath away.
When you see one rolling down the street, you're like, oh.
I mean, you had that car stored here for at least 10, 20 years, 10, 15? I mean, a long time.
On and off.
On and off, but I mean, it was back and forth, but kind of storage, but
yeah, it was.
I would see it a lot.
You would see it a lot,
and it was like breathtaking every single time.
It's gorgeous, absolutely. It was that one was particularly stunning though. Like I'm telling you, the deep dish wheels really give it a different dimension, and it makes it looks like that Pan Am race car from the 70s. It just gave it this crazy wild look to it, and it had that obviously the Italian lines to it. So it's gorgeous. It's amazing. I remember when Lamborghini was remaking the car, or was going to, and then they decided not to, and I was like, yes, do this. It's so sexy.
I remember seeing that concept.
A Miura with like a modern engine and a 6-speed would be so sick.
I think
it was a concept car, and I thought they did at least the concept car looked fantastic.
It looked fantastic, way better than when they're reusing the Countach on a rebadged Aventador. Like that they didn't do that one right in my eyes.
That one didn't hit home.
Didn't do that name justice to me, but again, it's selling for over $2 million, so something's working for somebody. But yeah, I agree with the Miura. Yeah. Now, there was more mods though. Am I crazy? Didn't it have like xenon lights?
Oh yeah, we did that. We put xenon headlights on there so we could see at night.
The Miura was xenon headlights.
Yeah, I mean, look, the headlights in that car from the factory was, you might as well have a candle out the side of your window. You're dead at night.
iPhone.
Yeah, useless, completely useless. So, me and my dad got pretty obsessed with like putting bright lights on all these cars. I had my 328. I put xenons on. We put xenons on our Diablo. I mean, now you would put LEDs.
Sure.
Thank God. I mean, because xenons are such a pain in the ass to have a ballast and the high voltage transfer. All that. Right. Now it's so easy to have
brighter
good
headlights.
lighting on a car.
I'm blind all the time because of that. Unfortunately, everybody has bright LEDs.
Yeah, everyone has the brightest lights.
I look at
ever.
my rearview mirror. I'm like, oh my God, I'm dying. I got to wear sunglasses at night. But yeah,
yeah.
So you did fuel injection, xenon headlights. I mean, that's massive.
Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, we might have made a custom exhaust for it. They're almost all kind of custom exhaust, though.
Okay, handmade.
Yeah,
and the transverse. The engine was transverse.
Yeah, it was transverse,
and that transmission was okay. I mean, the transfer
not great, man. Not my favorite.
Okay,
that was an S, so it was sharing the oil with the engine, and that was not great. The SVs separate the tank, separate the sump. And you could do the modification on an S. It was a nightmare.
So the regular Miuras, the non-SVs, share oil with the transmission.
Yes.
So that transmission gets hot.
Yeah, it's running engine oil.
Wild.
Wild, man. It's the thought of it blows my mind. And it's a pretty rough transmission. Like, you got to really match your RPMs. You got to be a good driver. And Eddie knew how to work that car. You had a lot of
cars. He knows. He was definitely a car guy. He was a car guy.
He was a car guy.
He raced cars. You have his 550.
It was 550. Alex drove it, and
had his Porsche.
Another really good drivers. They were good drivers.
Yeah. Alex. Yeah. Saw Alex in a GT2 RS. He definitely vibes driver.
He's a bad dude. Alex was badass. He took that 550, drove it to the racetrack, raced, eat Porsches. And drive it home. I don't like
that. We're going to have to talk about that 550 on another podcast, but that's exciting. All right. So interesting. So the transverse engine, so the Countach was a massive improvement for the Miura because they separated the oil.
It was a huge step forward for the frame.
Right.
It was much stronger, being a tubular. It was a much more modern style frame than what the Miura had. Uh-huh. It was... the engine transmission layout was correct.
Right.
So you started to have a real... They made huge improvements. It was a much more rigid chassis, way better handling car. Of course, visibility was questionable, but like it was a pretty good car for that jump in technology.
Definitely much better car.
Much
overall.
better. They did a really good job on I guess picking up where that car left off. But like, because to continue doing the Miura, they had to completely redesign it if they were going to try to keep that car going.
Right.
Because it was.
But is the block and the heads similar design, and they just
Yes.
moved where the transmission bolts on it? Is that how it works?
Yeah, it is a similar design, but the whole block situation is different to accommodate the transmission. So
okay.
it's the heads and all that are very similar
Okay.
to where the Countach came from. So it wasn't like a big jump as far as that goes. But like they were just like, okay, now
Is the Countach block closer to the original 350 GT?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they took that. They went back to the roots of no, it's got to be this direction.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I understand the theory behind a transverse mounted engine, you know, getting your center of weight closer to the center of the car. Mm-hmm. I get it. There's a reason why engineers thought that was the way to go.
308s and Ferrari 328s. Yeah.
Forever. And
Yeah.
So, and then they did it on the job, but they used it.
The Vector, even the Vector was
yeah.
with the GM engine at that time, not the Diablo, but with the GM.
And it makes sense because the V12 is such a long engine, right? So it's thinner than it is longer, right? So I get where they were going with it, but definitely to work on the car, removing the heads of that car was a nightmare. You had to try not to break the rear glass, pulling off the heads, pulling out the engine. You had to like roll the engine out. That car is not for the weak of heart, man. It's not an easy car to work on. Like you see things. That's what it would fool you. You're like, look, right there's the water pump. I could just pull that out. And it was like, oh, it hits the frame. Oh, it doesn't. Oh, you got to remove this and that. You're like, oh.
Always harder than it looked.
Way, way more complex than you thought things were going to be.
Okay. Interesting.
So it was, yeah.
And the car, after you did the fuel injection, was reliable, starting right up.
Yeah, it was definitely more reliable in that factor. It would start up pretty well. It would warm up pretty well. And the car ran great because the original carburetors had like without tuning it by like a master, there's always a dead spot in the throttle range. It was always a compromise to get that car right. Like you'd have a good top end, but like that off the line stumble, it was never quite right.
Very hard to dial in.
Very hard to dial in.
And you said 4 3-barrels, so that are
4 3-barrels.
4 3-barrels.
Yes.
So 1 3-barrel carburetor for every 4 cylinders. Is that how that worked? Or no, it's shared the one intake, and they just put
no. It was the carburetors were right on top, so it was almost they look like ITBs.
Okay.
So it's like a 3-barrel carburetor on top of 3 cylinders, and 2 of those in a row made a 6-cylinder on each side.
Got it. Okay.
So and all the linkage in the world.
And all the linkage in the world. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Like all those cars.
Wow. So the fuel injection probably gave it drivability and more of a.
I felt like a serious
more horsepower. Right?
I would say
it's dialed in
50 more horsepower. It felt.
Oh my gosh!
It felt tremendously faster than the carbureted.
So out of all the Miuras, Van Halen's Miura out there is probably one of the fastest ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think whoever got the car restored it and bring it back to carburation. Oh. So
there's that. I mean, the
collectability
part, but
right, it's worth too much money. I get it, but the fuel injection was a real nice upgrade, and we did the best we can with that technology. This was 10, 15 years ago. So I mean, putting fuel injection on it today would be probably tremendous.
Am I crazy? I thought Jay Leno did the same.
No. His cars are.
Is that the only fuel injected Miura
that I ever knew of, that I've ever seen?
Wow.
I don't think anybody else has ever done one. I mean, who's going to do one? I don't know.
Yeah. That would be weird if the phones start ringing off the hook going, hey, Damian, will you fuel inject my Miura? What?
Yeah,
no.
Don't call me.
Damian, thank you for filling me in on Van Halen's Miura. Freaking exciting.
Absolutely,
awesome.
man. It's
R.I.P. Van Halen.
I appreciate the great questions.